In the swamps, earth and water blur into one restless body. The air hangs heavy, smelling of moss and rain, buzzing with the rasp of insects. Shadows ripple across the surface, part reflection, part predator waiting below. To most, it feels like a place to escape. But for the tribes who live here, it is home. Every root, every reed, every hidden current carries knowledge passed through generations. In this world where danger and nourishment flow from the same dark waters, survival is not about control. It is about learning to listen. Far from the lowland swamps, life on Lake Titicaca floats upon the water itself, where the Uros have built entire islands from reeds, turning a fragile plant into home, boat, and sanctuary. High in the Andes, where thin air carries the breath of the gods and clouds drift like ancient spirits, lies Lake Titicaca, the largest mirror of the sky. Here, the Uros people shaped a life not on solid ground, but on water itself. With nothing but reeds and patience, they built floating islands, drifting sanctuaries that rise and fall with the lake's endless tides. Entire villages rest upon these fragile foundations, homes and pathways bound together by the same plants that feed their animals and fuel their fires. To gaze upon them is to witness a civilization that turned fragility into permanence. Yet survival on water has never been gentle. The islands decay beneath their feet, demanding constant renewal, layer upon layer of freshly cut reeds. Every storm becomes a trial. When winds howl down from the Andes, waves surge across the lake, threatening to tear apart what hands have so carefully woven. In distant centuries, the Uros were pursued by rival empires and warriors. To escape, they retreated deeper into the lake, vanishing into a labyrinth of floating refugees invisible to the enemy. Their islands were not only homes, but shields, drifting fortresses built on impermanence. Through centuries of hardship, the Uros learned to endure where others could not. Their reed boats skimmed the waters like arrows of gold, their songs carried across the lake as prayers to the sun. Every layer of totora beneath them became a testimony of resilience, every floating island a story of defiance against the elements and against time itself. As dusk falls, Lake Titicaca burns with amber light, and the islands glow like jewels scattered across the water. The Uros remain, guardians of a way of life as delicate as reeds, yet as unyielding as the mountains that surround them. In the heart of Mesopotamia's wetlands, where rivers braid into a vast green labyrinth, the Madan have fashioned reed into houses, canoes, and sanctuaries, sustaining life in the shifting marshes for centuries. In the heart of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates once gave birth to the first great cities of humankind, lies a world of water and reeds. Here, in a labyrinth of marshes stretching to the horizon, the Madan carved their home. Known as the Marsh Arabs, they built entire villages, not from stone or timber, but from reeds bound together in elegant arches and sweeping forms. Their dwellings, called mudhifs, rose from the water like temples woven from living plants, shimmering in the heat of the southern sun. To wander through this landscape was to step back into the cradle of civilization, where water shaped every breath of life. Yet life in the marshes was never a paradise. With every season, the floods returned, reshaping the land and sweeping through villages. Fish and buffalo sustained them, but storms and disease haunted their watery world. The Madan endured centuries of upheaval, from foreign invasions to shifting empires that sought control of the rivers. Their greatest struggle came in modern times, when the marshes themselves were drained and burned. Entire waterways turned to dust in an effort to erase a people and their way of life. Where once there were vast, shimmering wetlands, only cracked earth and silence remained. Survival meant exile, scattering to the winds, carrying only memory of water. And yet, the marshes endured. Like the reeds that bend but never break, the Madan returned with the floods, rebuilding their floating homes, reviving their buffalo herds, and breathing life back into the drowned heart of Mesopotamia. The water returned, and with it, the songs, the canoes, the great houses of woven reeds that seemed to rise like mirages from the water's surface. Today, as the rivers once more spread across the lowlands, the Madan stand as guardians of a fragile, resurrected world, their story inseparable from the ancient waters that once gave birth to humanity itself. On the waters of Lake Nokwe, an entire city rises on wooden stilts. Here, the Ganvie people have built a floating Venice of Africa, where canals replace streets and life is carried by boat. Across the waters of Lake Nokwe in Benin, wooden stilts rise from the surface like a forest of pillars. Balanced upon them are homes, schools, and markets, forming Ganvie, a city not built on land, but entirely upon water. Centuries ago, the Tofinu people sought refuge from slave raids that swept across the land. The lake became their sanctuary, its waters an impenetrable barrier to their pursuers. From necessity, they built a floating world, crafting a community where every path was a waterway and every journey began with a paddle. To this day, Ganvie endures as one of the largest lake villages on Earth, a living monument to resilience and escape. Life upon water, however, carries its own struggles. The people of Ganvie rely on fragile wooden stilts that must be rebuilt when they weaken beneath storms or decay under the constant kiss of the lake. Canoes serve as their horses, guiding families to markets where goods are traded boat to boat. Floods, disease, and the scarcity of fertile soil for farming have long tested their survival. Yet the greatest conflict was never just with nature, but with history itself. Born out of the need to flee enslavement, Ganvie was a society forged in defiance, its very existence a rejection of oppression. Every plank and pole carries the memory of survival against forces that sought to erase them. Still, Ganvie thrives, rising above its challenges, like the stilted homes that grace the water's surface. In the morning light, the lake becomes a mirror, reflecting the silhouettes of fishermen casting their nets, children guiding canoes between narrow waterways, and women balancing goods across the water's surface as though walking upon liquid earth. The village glows with the spirit of endurance, a city afloat, a community born from struggle yet sustained by harmony with the lake. Ganvie remains not just the Venice of Africa, but a testament to the human will to turn hardship into sanctuary, to build permanence upon a shifting tide. On Cambodia's Tonle Sap Lake, whole villages drift with the seasons, floating homes and markets that rise and fall with the monsoon's pulse, mirroring the lake's endless transformation. In the heart of Cambodia lies Tonle Sap, a vast inland sea that breathes with the seasons. During the dry months, its waters shrink, revealing fields and channels. But when the monsoons arrive, rivers reverse their flow, and the lake swells to 5 times its size, swallowing forests and plains in an ocean of flood. Along these shifting waters live the floating tribes, people whose homes, schools, and temples rest not on land, but on buoyant rafts of wood and bamboo. Their world rises and falls with the pulse of the monsoon, an existence forever bound to the rhythm of water. Life here is a constant negotiation with change. The lake brings fish in abundance, yet also danger. Storms can shatter boats, currents can scatter entire villages, and disease follows the floods. For centuries, the Tonle Sap tribes have lived at the mercy of these waters, building homes that drift and moor, rebuilding as the lake transforms. During seasons of abundance, fish markets spill across the waterways, voices echoing over water as traders meet boat to boat. But in times of scarcity, the struggle is fierce, survival depending on the skill of casting nets and navigating waters that shift without warning. Still, the people endure, transforming hardship into harmony. Their boats glide through flooded forests, where birds rise in clouds, their homes move with the currents as though alive, and their way of life becomes a living dance with the monsoon. From above, the floating villages appear like constellations of rooftops upon a liquid sky, drifting communities that defy the permanence of land. As dawn spreads golden light across the swelling waters, the Tonle Sap tribes remind us of resilience in motion, a people who learned not to resist the flood, but to float with it, shaping a culture as fluid and enduring as the lake itself. On Myanmar's Inle Lake, the Intha glide across the water on slender boats, balancing with one leg while rowing with the other, a graceful dance of fishing and survival found nowhere else in the world. High in the Shan hills of Myanmar, where mountain mists drift over silver waters, lies Inle Lake, a mirror to the sky, calm yet alive. Upon its surface move slender boats, guided not by hands but by legs. The Intha people, dwellers of these waters, are known for their graceful leg rowing, a technique born from necessity. Standing upon one foot, they wrap the other around a long oar, steering their narrow canoes with balance and rhythm. This unique dance upon water allows them to see above the reeds and lotus blooms, navigating where others could not. It is a craft passed from father to son, a skill etched into the very identity of the Intha. Yet this beauty masks a harder truth. The lake, though serene, offers little space for agriculture, and the Intha turned to the water itself for survival. They built floating gardens, layers of lake weed and soil bound together to form fertile plots tethered to the lakebed with bamboo poles. Tomatoes, cucumbers, and flowers bloom atop water, swaying gently with each breeze. But storms threaten these delicate gardens, and floods can uproot entire harvests. In times past, conflict rose from neighboring tribes and shifting kingdoms, and the Intha found safety only upon the lake, using its open expanse as both shield and sustenance. Still, they endured. The leg rowers became icons of balance and strength, their movements a living symbol of harmony with the water. As dawn breaks, silhouettes of fishermen cast conical nets into golden light, their bodies poised like statues in motion. Monasteries float upon stilts, markets drift upon rafts, and entire villages glide with the lake's gentle tide. From above, Inle Lake becomes a world of reflections, sky in water, homes in motion, lives lived between stillness and flow. The Intha remain, guardians of a life shaped by water, their strength born from the quiet mastery of balance, endurance, and grace. In Botswana's Okavango Delta, tribes navigate the labyrinth of swamp channels in slender Makoro canoes, living in harmony with the water's shifting maze of reeds and wildlife. In the heart of southern Africa, where desert sands stretch endlessly, a miracle of water blooms. Each year, the Okavango River spills into the Kalahari, not to the sea, but into a vast inland delta, creating one of the richest wetlands on Earth. Here, among winding channels, islands, and papyrus thickets, live the tribes of the Okavango. For generations, they have moved with the floodwaters, gliding silently in mokoros, narrow canoes carved from wood, pushing through waters that teem with fish, birds, and crocodiles. Their world is a kingdom of reeds and reflections where life is measured by the flood's return. Yet paradise carries its trials. The Okavango floods are unpredictable, sometimes generous, sometimes withholding. Too much water can drown crops and scatter game, while too little threatens hunger and hardship. Hippos guard the waterways, elephants roam the islands, and storms sweep across the floodplains with sudden fury. For the tribes, survival has always meant adaptation, building homes upon raised mounds, hunting with skill, and fishing with patience. In the past, conflict rose not only from the wild, but from rival groups, each seeking control of the fertile channels. The swamp became both refuge and battlefield, its shifting waters protecting those who understood its secrets. Through endurance, the Okavango tribes learned to thrive in this world of abundance and peril. Their mokoros glide like arrows across mirrored water, carrying hunters, families, and stories that have passed through generations. Each season, as the floods return from distant rains in Angola, the delta awakens with life, and the people rise with it. From above, the Okavango appears as a living mosaic, glittering streams winding through emerald islands, villages perched on its edges, canoes tracing patterns across its surface. The tribes remain as stewards of this oasis, bound to the rhythm of flood and drought, their lives forever entwined with one of the last great wildernesses of the earth. Across the seas of Southeast Asia, the Bajau live almost entirely afloat, nomadic people who spend their lives on water, diving, fishing, and dwelling in homes that drift with the tides. Across the shallow seas and mangrove swamps of Southeast Asia, drifts a people who have lived more upon water than land. The Bajau, often called the sea nomads, fashioned their world upon the tides, building homes on stilts above lagoons and crafting boats that became both shelter and vessel. For centuries, they roamed between the islands of the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, never tied to a single shore. Their lives flowed with the sea itself, guided by memory of reefs, winds, and currents. To see the Bajau from above is to glimpse villages that seem to float, clusters of wooden homes surrounded by an endless horizon of blue. But life on the water is a struggle against nature's edge. Storms rise with sudden violence, tearing through homes and boats with little mercy. Fishing is their lifeblood, yet the sea is both generous and dangerous, filled with shifting tides, sharp coral, and predators lurking in the depths. For centuries, the Bajau faced more than storms. Their nomadic life left them vulnerable to kingdoms and authorities who sought control over the coasts, forcing them further out into the margins of the sea. Land was scarce, belonging to others, so the Bajau clung ever tighter to the waters, finding freedom where others saw only risk. From hardship came resilience. The Bajau learned to dive deeper than most humans, their bodies adapting to hold breath for minutes beneath the sea, their eyes adjusting to the dim light of underwater worlds. Children grew up leaping into the shallows, learning to swim before they could walk. Every canoe, every stilted village became an extension of the water itself. As the sun sets upon mangrove swamps and coral bays, The Bajau move across the sea with the grace of a people at home, between sky and tide. Their story is one of endurance and belonging, a reminder that humanity can root itself even where there is no land, only water without end. In the waterways of Xochimilco, descendants of the Aztecs still tend chinampas, ingenious floating gardens that turn swamp and soil into fertile islands of life. In the valley, once ruled by the Aztec Empire, water shaped a city unlike any the world had seen. Among the lakes of ancient Mexico, the people built chinampas, floating gardens created from mud, reeds, and willow. These plots were tethered to the shallow lakebed, fertile rafts that turned water into farmland. Row upon row of maize, beans, squash, and flowers rose from the surface, forming green carpets upon the shimmering blue. Entire communities thrived upon this innovation, a landscape so carefully woven that the lakes became a living mosaic of food and beauty. Even today, in the canals of Xochimilco, echoes of this ingenuity remain. Yet the chinampas were born from struggle. The Aztecs, pushed onto swampy land with little soil, faced hunger and constraint. Survival demanded invention, and so they drew upon the waters themselves, turning marsh into abundance. For centuries, these floating fields fed empires, sustaining warriors and priests, builders and rulers of Tenochtitlan. But this triumph carried challenges. Floods threatened to wash away their harvests, while drought could wither the canals. Rival tribes sought to destroy the lifeblood of the empire, and each season brought uncertainty to those who depended on these fragile rafts of earth. The chinampas endured not through conquest, but through relentless renewal. Even as empires fell, the legacy of the chinampa lived on. In Xochimilco today, canals wind between gardens still anchored by willows, where farmers harvest vegetables from the same waters their ancestors once worked. Boats drift between floating plots, carrying both food and memory. From above, the chinampas appear like emerald jewels scattered across water, remnants of a civilization that learned to draw life from swamp and lake. They stand as proof that resilience is born from necessity, that humanity can flourish not only on land, but on soil pulled from the depths of water. The floating gardens remain, enduring symbols of adaptation and survival, whispering the ingenuity of the Aztec world into the present. Along the vast Sepik River wetlands of Papua New Guinea, swamp tribes carve out their lives on shifting waters, building homes on stilts and drawing spirit, food, and story from the river's flow. In the northern lowlands of New Guinea, the Sepik River winds like a living serpent through endless swamps and lagoons. Along its banks and within its flooded forests live tribes whose lives are inseparable from the water. For generations, the people of the Sepik carved their homes on stilts above the floodplains, raising them against the rise of seasonal waters. Canoes became their roads, and the river itself their lifeline, carrying food, stories, and traditions from village to village. From above, the wetlands appear as a mosaic of green and silver, scattered with clusters of stilted dwellings that seem to hover above the shifting tide. Yet to live in the swamps is to face constant trials. The waters are home to crocodiles that lurk beneath the reeds, to floods that can swallow entire villages, and to storms that sweep across the plains with sudden violence. Disease rises with the floods, and crops struggle in the saturated earth. In the past, rival clans often clashed across these waterways, turning the river into both protector and battlefield. Survival meant not only mastering the dangers of the swamp, but also drawing strength from it, carving a culture that could endure against both nature and time. Through resilience, the Papua swamp tribes forged identities as strong as the river's current. Their art, carved into towering ancestral houses and masks, drew upon the spirits believed to dwell in the wetlands. Their canoes, cut from single trees, glide across the water like arrows, carrying hunters, families, and elders who preserve memory through story. At night, fires flicker from raised homes, their reflections rippling across black water like constellations on Earth. From above, the Sepik wetlands shimmer with life, a place where every channel, every pool, carries the presence of a people who learned to belong in a world both fragile and fierce. The swamp tribes of Papua endure as guardians of water and story, keepers of a life inseparable from the great river that sustains them. Among the tangled mangroves of Southeast Asia, the Orang Laut sea people roam the swamps and coastal shallows, living as navigators and guardians of the tidal world. Scattered across the coasts of Malaysia and Indonesia, where the sea seeps into tangled forests of mangrove and swamp, dwell the Orang Laut, the sea people. For centuries, they lived not on fixed land, but upon boats and stilted homes, drifting between islands, their lives tied to the ebb and flow of the tide. Their knowledge of reefs, hidden channels, and shifting currents was so complete that once they guided kings and traders across the waters of the Malay world. To see them from above is to witness villages poised upon the edges of land and sea, houses standing on stilts above tidal mudflats, canoes gliding through green labyrinths of mangrove roots. Yet the life of the Orang Laut was never without conflict. The seas that nourished them also brought storms that could crush fleets and scatter families across the waves. Pirates, rival kingdoms, and foreign empires pressed into their waters, forcing the Orang Laut to guard their freedom against powers far larger than themselves. Living at the margins, they became both feared and sought after. Feared for their mastery of the sea, yet relied upon for their unmatched skill as navigators and fishermen. Hunger, raids, and exile tested them again and again, but the sea remained their constant refuge. Through hardship, the Orang Laut endured by becoming one with the waters. Their boats became floating homes, their nets a lifeline, their mangrove swamps both shelter and sustenance. Children learned to swim as naturally as they breathed, their lives molded by tide and current. As dawn rises over the coastal swamps, the world of the Orang Laut glows with quiet resilience. Smoke curling from stilted huts, canoes slicing across tidal channels, and the endless horizon reminding them of their eternal bond with the sea. Their story is one of survival and belonging, a people who found their strength not in claiming land, but in surrendering to the restless embrace of water. Along Thailand's coastal swamps and lagoons, the Chao Lay, often called water gypsies, sustain their lives on the tides, drifting between sea and shore in a rhythm as old as the waves. Along the shores of Thailand, where mangrove swamps melt into turquoise seas and lagoons stretch beneath the horizon, dwell the Chao Lay, the people of the sea. For centuries, they lived as wanderers upon the waves, their homes carried by boats, their lives bound to the rhythm of tides and winds. Villages rose upon stilts above shallow waters, houses balanced between mangrove roots and sandy shoals. From above, these settlements appear as scattered jewels set upon shifting blue, fragile yet enduring against the push of waves. The Chao Lay are often called water gypsies, a name that echoes their drifting spirit, a people who carried their world across the sea. Yet life upon these waters was marked by hardship. Storms could sweep across the coast without warning, tearing apart boats and scattering families across the sea. Food came from nets cast into uncertain tides, and the mangrove swamps that sheltered them were also home to dangers that tested their resilience. For centuries, the Chao Lay lived at the margins, faced with the challenge of survival in lands claimed by others, their lives threatened not only by the sea, but by the weight of empires and kingdoms pressing against their shores. Their wandering was born not from restlessness alone, but from necessity, an endless search for freedom and refuge.